Oh my God. That's amazing, Eric.
It was very cold.
Well, that was one thing that ran through my mind. Oh my God, that is amazing. Wow. Okay, so my first question is, hold on, let me just get myself together here. Facebook has changed their look for some reason. Okay. Wow. So, okay. Let's see. Get my stuff together. Okay, here we are. All right. So, my first question here for you is how does that happen? How does that gig happen?
Well, so I actually played inside a volcano in Iceland. And when you do one thing, it often sets other things in motion, even if it takes many years. So in
That's so true.
2014, I
Yeah.
played in this Icelandic volcano, partially because I had a trip to Iceland, and I heard that this was one of the only volcanoes in the world you could go inside of. And not active, of course, otherwise we wouldn't be
Yeah.
here. But it allowed you to kind of like go from the peak and then descend into the actual cavern. And when I played there, I was just amazed by the sound. National Icelandic Television also came and filmed the experience. And then when I was in Alaska in September last year, there were some of my hosts, and they were like, "Well, that sounds awesome. Well, you should definitely play in the glaciers out here." And so one thing led to another, and I was like, "Okay, let's. What's the best time of year to go?" And there's a very narrow window where it's safe to actually go inside, and where the glaciers are developed. So in April, about the second week, we were able to go in and really experience what that was like. And so I brought in several friends as well, and we used flax fiber instruments in that case because it was really cold. And a wooden instrument you wouldn't want to put through that kind of condition. But in addition to being very cold for the instruments, it was very cold for us too. So that was an
Yeah.
interesting experience playing with, fingers. You couldn't really feel the very tips of your fingers while you're
Yeah.
playing.
One thing I was thinking about was, I guess you're talking about the window of opportunity, that the glaciers would melt, from the vibration. I don't know, the vibration of the
The
music.
temperature primarily.
Oh, okay.
Vibration, no, but we did do things according to permit. So a
Yeah.
lot of people would just go in, but we actually tried to make sure we were being very careful with everything environmentally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is certain requirements. I mean, you want to be careful with what kind of lights you're using, for instance, to
Yeah.
get filming. So you're not using super high intensity heated ones. Also, everything has to be battery powered, so it does put a limit on what kind of electricity you're using as well. But it was quite an experience because you had to hike actually about an hour to get there, or 40 minutes. We made it a little faster sometimes. Um, but after you got back from that experience, it's just, it's one of those things where, wow, that actually happened. And when you're there, you just feel very present. Um, but it's a little different. In the volcano, I felt present the entire period. This one, it's interjected with, wow, this is really cold. And so you're kind of going back and forth between, oh, this is really cold. I need to keep moving. Oh, I have to play soon. And, in the volcano, it was more like, wow, I just get to enjoy this. And I'm not freezing completely, even though it was also cold there.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm just going to close my door.
Yeah.
Sometimes the noise bothers me, and sometimes it doesn't. Um, and so I think you mentioned how it sounded in the volcano, and was it a similar experience in the glaciers? And could you even put that into words?
Well, the sound you just heard was actually direct from the glacier. It didn't have any reverb or processing in that regard. So basically, that was just straight out the sound in the glacier. In the volcano, there's a video online, which I play a little bit where you can hear it. It's a lot more alive and reverberant. So the type of material, you know, all the rocks inside the volcano, it really has a very different kind of reflection to the sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, it's not as big in some ways.
Right.
So the glacier just stretches on and on. It's quite astounding. And also, depending on where you stand in the glacier, you get completely different sounds. So I would actually
Yeah.
experiment when I first went in and try to find some areas where the sound was really quite unique and special. And we found one cavern where it was bizarre because you'd play in this one area, it'd warm up the sound, but you couldn't record there. You'd have to go a little bit further, and that was where the best sound was. So you'd actually go like 6 feet away, and there was another indentation here in the cavern, and that sound also like it just kind of was like a microphone was there a little bit, and amazing what all that acoustic variety was like in the glacier.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just such an interesting thing to consider. You know, the shapes and the material, and does the material soak in the sound? And it's probably a mixture of everything, or does it bounce it back? Where is it warm? Where is it cold? What does cold even sound like? I mean, I guess you want it a little, warmer in words, right? But yeah,
Yeah,
it
so ice does not
wow,
reflect as directly as rock does in terms of the
right.
way it actually sounds. So you actually get a lot more diffusion in the sound.
Huh. And rock, I don't know if I would have. I mean, I'm not a geologist, but I guess I wouldn't just think offhand that rock would be, a good place to record something, to have a good sound. But when I think about it, when you're in a cave, there's all these echoes, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I mean, so, for those of you listening, I've known Eric for a few years, but it's kind of an interesting relationship because we're on a Zoom call with classical and jazz people, I would say, for the most part, and it's been it's been really fun. It's actually once a week. Sometimes you don't make it for whatever reason. Eric Eric seems to be he'll call from like somewhere in the world. Hi, and or he's walking down a crowded street in China, or I mean, there's so many funny places that you've called from, actually. Um, so, and yeah, but I mean, we haven't had like a chance to really sit and talk for a long time. So, this is really good. Um, so there are questions that I have that I probably have wanted to know from the beginning. Were you a student of Larry's, Larry Livingston?
No, I never studied with Larry Livingston.
Okay.
Actually, my partner, Monwen Lo, she
Yeah.
studied at USC
Right.
conducting with Dr. Livingston. So that was where I think the connection first started there. And I
Yeah.
went to her conducting recital, and that's where I met Larry for the first time.
Oh, I see. Okay. And I think it said, but I'm just going to ask you as if I never looked at everything. Um, where did you spend your studying years?
Okay, well, we're going to go back to the beginning. So, fourth generation violinist, so
Oh,
already very early. Um,
wow.
and at age 5, I started playing the violin, 5 and a half.
Oh,
The first concert was at 6, and somehow that was at Manhattan School of Music. But I started studying, I think, probably first with my mom, and then I think after that, Kurt Sassman-Solf, and then shortly after, Dorothy DeLay as well at the same time, and that was the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. Then at IU, when I was probably, I don't know, 10 or something like that,
wow.
I was in the college division for 1 year studying with Iquan Bay there. And then shortly after, it was with Mr. Perlman, Hyo Kong, and then Dorothy DeLay had passed right shortly after. And so I had encounters with people like Patinka Kopek, Stefan Milenkovic, and then Robert Mann, who was the first violinist of Juilliard Quartet. I was studying with him and Perlman at the same time.
Wow.
Glenn Dicterow as well, who was concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic for 34 years. And then also Pinchas Zuckerman in Canada a bit, and then a lot of other people with encounters, but not as much as probably those main ones.
Yeah. And were you just in the same city as they were, or did you go to school? Obviously, when you were 10, you weren't going to college, but
Well, I was in the college actually,
were you actually studying
but
college
it was
courses?
only college credits for lessons at that
I
point.
see.
They used to have a program called the Open Program at Indiana University.
Oh,
Yeah, so I was getting college credits very early, but then
huh.
shortly after I went to Juilliard Pre-College.
Yeah.
So I was there for 6 years and then went to
Okay.
Columbia and Juilliard, did the joint
Yeah.
program because I had already been there for 6 years. I didn't want to just stay there for, 12 years or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because there's no grass that grows under your feet, man.
Yeah, and they were under construction, so there's the joke, the jail yard. And it actually felt a little bit like that because all this construction was constantly surrounding the building. And then gradually the security kept getting more and more improved, which would mean that then you needed to like literally push on the practice rooms, reserve it, and then if you forgot to push this door when you left, it would lock you out after 15 minutes, and then you'd have to find another
Oh,
room or yeah. So I mean, it got a little bit. When I first went, it was very easy to go in and out, but there are there's a urban legend or something. I'm not sure if it's true, but apparently somebody walked out in construction gear or like some kind of security
oh.
gear once back in like the 70s or 80s with a full piano. So I mean, I don't think that would be happening today, but so to speak, like apparently they took it apart and then like started walking out with it.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
That's wild. I mean, it could have happened, and stranger things have happened.
Well, the funniest ones are like I have so many friends these days, and I see music stands from California all the way to the East Coast in New York, and they show up across coasts or across different places, and I can see room 309 or NEC or Indiana University, and I'm just like, wow, you really brought that all the way across the entire country.
That's funny, huh? Music stand. Yeah.
Yeah, one music stand. So if they vanished, I think I've located at least a few at this point.
Uh, well, so when your mom's teaching you when you're 5 or however old she started, so is she thinking I'm going to raise a virtuoso, or is she just thinking I want my child to be connected to music, so this is what I
It's
can
hard
give
to
him.
hard to say. I think it was more just like, oh, he should learn the violin. Um,
Yeah,
I don't really think there was, preconceptions of everything at that point.
yeah,
But the thing is, when you show ability and can do things quickly, then, people want to push as fast as they can to see what's possible. And for me, I always protected my relationship with music, I think, because I would play when I wanted to play. And I was very adamant about that, even at a young age.
really.
Yeah, so as a result, it wasn't because somebody told me to do something. It was more self-driven.
Yeah, yeah. I was just talking about that with somebody. They were talking about, can't remember exactly, but they were saying we were referring to a child practicing, and he was saying, um, yeah, you make him practice, and I was like, that's kind of that's wrong. The child should want to play and be curious, and that's something to kind of instigate and, you know, um, create more of in your child's awareness, and then the child wants to play for the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult thing for violin in particular because you do have to build up a lot of your technique. And the vast majority of violinists that are professional started when they were around 5, 6,
Oh,
or even earlier.
yeah,
So it's one of those things where sometimes, the kid isn't going to want to do some of that stuff early on. So you need a little bit of a push. But the thing is, like, it can't be the type of thing where it's like you're going to practice 9 hours a day or else you're not eating today. Like things like that aren't good ideas. There's
right.
extremes. And I feel like that used to happen probably back in the day with some of those violinists.
Yeah,
But it's interesting because I think it doesn't matter what field you really study, but if you get really good at one particular area, you can apply a lot of that and the learnings from that into other fields. And so I actually found a lot of my colleagues, in Juilliard pre-college, many of them went into music,
Mm.
but some of them went into other, areas, and they were very quick to learn many things. And the reason was they just kept that routine. I was practicing 3 hours a day for 20 years, somebody would say. And so then I just, I wanted to switch careers when they were 25 or something. And so what they just did is 3 hours a day. They just started learning about the subject 3 hours a day, very focused. And after like 6 months, one of them went from being in consulting to being in tech, just from that,
Mm.
and created like the top utility apps, so like keyboards in languages that Apple didn't support yet. And that's one of my friends. And he
Wow,
was a cellist, still plays sometimes, but yeah.
that's really interesting. I love that. I find that very truthful and exciting, that concept. Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, when you were growing up and you were spending a lot of time, regardless of how many hours, but a lot of time.
Well,
So
not as much actually early on.
really,
Yeah, but just very
so
focused, and
so
it was
you
very
were
consistent, so I
you're
didn't
going
really
out
take off.
playing baseball and stuff too?
I did all sorts of sports growing up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, I had a more normal childhood, I would say, than most people in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then I hate to ask this, but I really have to because I've never had the opportunity. What makes a virtuoso? When did you get that title? Does is
Well, I don't think it's something you give yourself. It's just
Yeah.
something people just start calling you
Uh-huh.
regularly,
Yeah.
and we just start hearing it from other people a lot. I would say that there are certain pieces when you can play them, people would say, "Oh, that's virtuoso." So, like, if you play Mozart concertos, you can be a virtuoso, but if you play Paganini caprices and you play them well, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's very virtuosic," or, he was a definition of a virtuoso
I
from
see.
a lot of perspectives. So, like, you see some trumpet players and they'll play certain pieces, you're like, "Oh, virtuoso." But the thing is, what is a virtuoso is a very interesting question for me because, there's of course dictionary definitions, but very virtuosic playing for me, the most impressive ones are when you have somebody doing something slow and they can
Mm,
vary the tonal color and do all sorts of stuff. And it's because they have an interesting concept of what they want to hear that they're able to create it. And the virtuosity for me is the ability to create different kinds of sound in a free way, where you basically just imagine a sound and you can immediately create it.
interesting. I think I brought this up at one of our meetings, but when I recorded uh, a song by Scarlatti.
Hmm.
And the reason I recorded that song, because as you know, I'm a jazz singer. So, um, because my piano tuner would, every time he would come to tune the piano, he would play that song at the end to see how it sounded, the piano. And the song it was so perfect for me, and it was even in my vocal key, which is very unusual. You never hear stuff in alto keys. So, but when I was looking around for different performances, it was and now I'm going to forget the name, the famous pianist who is a very well-known, very free, but he plays classical. I think he's probably passed away now. Anyway,
Vladimir Horowitz, was it him? Or
Horowitz. Yeah, I think it was Horowitz.
he was a
Yeah,
big fan of Scarlatti.
yeah, I think it was Horowitz. And when he played, I was really struck with the personal freedom he brought to it. And he even changed like a little, you know, he probably changed a little timing thing rather than notes. But it was kind of jazz like to me. And so then I started kind of, because I don't listen, I'm not super, super involved with classical music. I don't know the answer to this. But would you say that um, uh, in your playing and in other people's playing, it's an admired thing to be like that, to have kind of a personal freedom when you're playing the music that might fluctuate the time, possibly a note or two. I don't know.
Well, I would argue it's something else entirely. It's like acting when you're having a role
Yeah.
and you want to believe it. And I think it's the same thing in music.
You want to believe it, not the audience. The
Both.
performer. Oh,
Ideally,
okay.
both want to believe it, but
Okay.
mainly the audience needs to believe it. In other
Right.
words, it's one of those performances where you believe this is the only way at that one moment.
Right.
And then the next, tomorrow you could feel something different, but
Yeah.
at that one moment you believe it so much that it convinces other people in a way. And I think that that's a really big part of it is that sometimes having the kind of focus on the moment and feeling like it's actually being created almost as it's happening. That's a big thing. And what's interesting for me is in jazz, of course, you change notes, you'll change timings, you'll do different things, but sometimes the beat will be very consistent in that. In classical music, I find it's more what you do within a different kind of frame. So you have the notes, you have the rhythm, but you can vary within certain parameters, and that there's a lot of detail and nuance in that. And that's where I think like somebody just the tone color they play, the dynamic they play on one note, they could spend 6 hours just trying a phrase, thinking about like, oh, what happens if I try it this way or that way? Oh, then what does that do to later in the piece? And so what's interesting for me is like somebody would call it a delta, what is the difference between all these different elements? And I think that in jazz in particular, it's got different deltas in some cases, really. Whereas in classical music, we have more freedom within the box in a certain sense of like the notes and the rhythm in the bar. But at the same time, like you know, there's that's what's so fun about. I just did my first three jazz concerts ever, like where it was like the entire concert was kind of in that style, 1920s music,
Oh, wow.
and just to kind of see where are the lines between the two, and I think they both complement each other really well. But it's at the same time, like, how do you play in such a way where people feel like you're losing yourself in the music, but you still have control?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the joy is for me. It's when you see an actor or an actress and you're seeing them really portray a character, and you forget that they're acting. That's when something's really special. And I think in music is the same thing. When you stop thinking, oh, they're playing in tune, or they're like doing
Yeah.
it's when all those elements come together, and you're like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's so true. There's so much in what you're saying right now. First of all, brings to mind when you said actor. I've been really fascinating with Meryl Streep. Man, she is so, I mean, she can go so many places, and it's like that. It's like I totally believe her. She's just eloquent. She's sophisticated in her delivery control, her soaking into it. And I saw her win like a grand award in France, and the woman who was giving it to her was a famous actress. Let's see if I can just is it is it somewhere here? No, not
Troops
that
in
one.
our city.
Not that. Was it this? Oh yeah, Juliette Binoche. I don't know if you're familiar with her. You probably know her face. She's older, and she's really a beautiful actress. She was kind of free flowing in her talking to Meryl, and she actually started crying because she was talking about Meryl, like how um, Meryl's ethics, maybe I'm just searching for my own words, but her ethics of everything that she did had affected um, everybody, both actors and audience, and so it was really quite beautiful. Um, but and then the other thing is, let's see, what else were you saying? Well, you described you described what happens so well, when you're in the moment and you're capable and you're moving. And um, as you said, jazz has I think what you said is like the area of jazz that jazz has to travel and to create, um, and then compared it with classical. But it's still the person in the moment, uh, entering into that special, um, I call it an aesthetic universe, and staying there and operating from there with others, many times, right? I mean, sometimes I guess you're solo, but yeah, you're with others as well. Yeah, it's, it's quite a beautiful thing. I really have, I feel like I've missed out not listening to classical all my life. I mean, really, really listening, you know. Um, and of course, there are things that I hear that I love, but it's not it's not as studied and as recognized for me as jazz is.
Well, that's the thing that's really interesting is there's a lot of parallels and even some pieces that transfer, some classical artists will give it a try. And so like you do see some crossover of some musicians trying out jazz. You see the ones
Yeah,
where they're successful, you see the ones where they're successful but not successful and sounding like it's in jazz because
yeah,
it still sounds very classical.
yeah.
But you know what? I stopped trying to think of like this is what it should sound like rather than this is just what it sounds like. And
Yeah.
then you can enjoy it for what it is. And that's what's
Oh,
really,
yeah. And I know what you were saying something a little bit more like, when the artist, in my own words, when the artist does something, the audience, well, you said, rather than think, oh, that person has very good technique, rather than think that, it's more like you're totally moved. And then you realize, wow, their technique is amazing, because you just realize it. I really enjoy Cecile McLaurin Salvant. Are you familiar with her?
I've listened some, but I need to hear more.
Yeah, um, especially live. She's really quite amazing. She um, she does a few different styles, genres, and her instrument is just, it's kind of perfect. It's great, and she can kind of come in and out of, let's say, perfection. I mean, just as she wishes. You know, and yeah, and I love her attitude. Her attitude is totally real. And I like how I like how she presents herself. It's very natural. It's not like all sexed up. It's just like, here I am. You know, and then the band, her relationship with the band musically is amazing. Um, I I I highly suggest seeing her live because it's very, very impressive. You know.
Yeah, that's something I always find interesting is how is a performance different live versus online listening
Yeah.
recordings or and even the way people are focusing their attention and listening. It's interesting because when you're listening with really amazing professional speakers or you're listening with headphones, you actually hear stuff you don't hear
Yeah.
from AirPods or from computers.
Yeah.
But that's how we do most of our listening. So it's interesting then what is it that we're missing versus what we're gaining in each context. And we could be gaining things also from hearing less of the detail too. But I do think there's something that we should all do listening on the best listening experience environment we can sometimes.
Yeah.
And
That's really interesting, actually. Um, yeah. I I remember going into the guy who masters my records, his space. Wow, that was like way different from what I hear. It's really full, and like you say, you can hear things that just sitting at my home computer, I don't hear. I don't hear it like that. Um, makes me think of this place in Seattle that my son-in-law told me about. It's a well, a Japanese man created it, and it's a listening room. You go in, there's a bar, and you can, imbibe, and then there's another room where you book ahead, but it's Friday night. We're going to listen to the Jimi Hendrix Experience, the whole record and in its entirety. Nobody's going to talk. You just go in and you're listening. That's it. So, and it's all different genres. It's just classic records that were considered classic. And yeah, it's kind of an amazing thing, right? To actually, with a group of people, just actually pay to go in and listen. I think it's fabulous. I'm opening this club here, and I think I want to actually stimulate that. I want to get, some really good DJ uh, to do that one of the nights. I think it would be great.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I've seen somebody listen to the recording and have no reaction, and then they listened to this one quartet, and shortly after, when they were listening to this quartet, they had tears streaming down their cheeks just from a better listening experience, and that's how much of a difference it made. So ever since I saw that, I was like, wow, this is something we should pay more attention to.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You do a lot of recording, right?
Yeah, up to a lot of microphones because I'm curious about how each microphone brings a different kind of perspective on sound. And when you put them together, you can create a
Right.
snapshot of the sound that's very unique and can be very expressive. So, of course, the player has to be making a good sound for you to capture to start with.
Yeah.
But then once you have that as a possibility, then you have so many ways you can, direct that sound or enhance or bring out certain aspects of the sound of that source.
So you would say it's maybe more about the microphone rather than the recording experience, the engineer, the studio.
Well, it's everything together. I mean, the better the room, the better. But it really
Yeah.
depends also on some isolation, because like in some cases, if you're isolating the sound and it's just really close up, you're not going to hear as much of the room. Most classical recordings, the better the room, the better the recording is going to be. Of course, if you use better microphones, it can sound much better, even in rooms that aren't ideal. And sometimes you have to be very creative. For instance, using a microphone that doesn't have omnidirection as much as you'd like to have that as your main pair, just because the room doesn't sound good. So you can close mic, you can do all sorts of things to kind of try to bring out the best of that room and of the sound. But I think what's so fascinating for me is that all these different elements are just for one thing, which is, does it sound good at the end? And you have to not forget that along the way you have all these possibilities, and very often, you focus on the details, you lose the forest. And one of my friends, Adam Abe's house, who sadly passed last year, about a year ago almost, he first time when I asked him about recording, that was the one piece of advice he gave me, and I've always kept that because does it sound good should always be the question. Do you feel good? Does it make you feel something? Does it sound good? And if those things are not the case, then you should do something differently. But if it has all those aspects, then it doesn't matter technically if there's something slightly off or this or that. It's going to still leave a better impression than something that doesn't sound good.
That's cool. Very cool. Yeah. It's like a little gem there. Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Um,
be very creative with miking techniques and sometimes do something that's incorrect, but it
yeah.
works in that room for that one person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of brings me to a question that I think about from time to time. Do you have a view of people being too perfect and not really paying attention to kind of what you're talking about? Like for instance, for me, there's like a number of younger singers coming up who are very they're into arrangements of jazz, specialized arrangements, um, and their singing, even though their singing is very good as far as technically speaking, and the arrangements are good, are written well and stuff, but I don't like it. I just I'd rather leave and go hear somebody who doesn't even sing as well, but whose heart is in it, you know? Do you have any views of that kind of stuff?
You have to have both, ideally, but you have to have your technique so well set that you don't have to think about it, and you can just do whatever you're imagining.
Yeah.
It's interesting for me because I work with opera singers a lot, and I have a music festival which has a vocal program every January, and in Hawaii, and so I get to hear all the vocal coaching and development, and those singers are meant to be producing a sound that's heard in 3,000 people in a giant concert hall without any amplification. And so they're working on how to produce that kind of sound with ease, not adding any tension over here and larynx, and just supporting with the diaphragm, but having flexibility and everything. And what's interesting for me is I also have worked with, some pop singers and some people that are doing in different genres, and even some engineers. I saw how they approached it because I brought in somebody to kind of help produce one of them, and I was producing the strings for that particular track. And what was interesting is they said, okay, let's get one vocal track to this thing. Good. Okay, now we're going to comp it. So the person was playing guitar with and singing at the same time. They took out the guitar using the software and the algorithm which isolated the voice. And then they added back in the guitar and had them sing along with it again. And then they basically did 2 takes and then just started using Melodyne to shift the pitch for everything. And then if there was like 1 or 2 bars where they said the wrong word or something, or they just, made some strange sound, then they would have, just redo that one spot. But basically it was like 2 takes and they just start, changing the
Yeah.
pitch.
Yeah.
And so actually, I actually appreciate a lot of those older recordings more because you actually hear when it's slightly not exactly in tune,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it actually can add a nice color if it's just slightly out of tune.
Yeah.
Like you hear a lot of Michael Jackson recordings. He wasn't using Melodyne on any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, he also was very adamant about keeping in breathing sounds. He would say to the engineers, don't remove any of that because now we have the technology to remove all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I do sometimes think something is lost when somebody goes in straight into Melodyne and tries to make everything perfectly in tune.
Yeah.
And it's then an interesting question. What is perfection? Because
Yeah.
perfection is in a way relating to something and feeling close to it and having an emotional reaction. And I think that the issue from what you're describing to me is sometimes we don't focus on in between the notes, the small nuances even on one note, and we focus more on the diction or trying to, get everything in tune and perfect. And when perfection becomes the goal, it ceases to be the musical expression. And so therefore perfection for me is when you have the expression uninhibited.
Yeah.
And when you have perfection as the goal, what ends up happening is you lose the expression to a large extent in most cases.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, if that's part of why people like Carmen McRae and Ella Fitzgerald and, were so um, loved for, from then to now because they had the humanistic uh, effect. They weren't fixing, only I'm sure they, cut the tape and spliced it, but only when, there was some big faux pas or something,
Yeah, but Ella also just had such an amazing sense of intonation too.
Yeah.
And so I think like there is a difference between being almost in tune all the time and then just being so in tune that like, even if it's slightly off, you don't mind. Because the sense of intonation, even if it's slightly off, it's still going to sound in tune in a certain sense because of the person, the way they're hearing sound.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting is, I interviewed for this company called Tone Base
Uh-huh.
around 40 violinists about all sorts of questions, and I made it a personal quest to ask things about intonation to a lot of them. And everyone seemed to have a different theory on what's in tune.
Really?
Yeah. So it was fascinating for me because, there are certain things in tuning where it can't be physically exactly in tune. You have tempered tuning on pianos, and now you're playing on a violin which is tuned, and you don't tune all 4 strings to the piano. You have them because they sound out of tune to each other when you play them on a violin, as fifths if they're like a little tighter to kind of match, or
Yeah.
and so it's interesting for me that like there's so much of a variety, even what within what we call perfect. People will say, "Oh, that's perfect," but it's within a range. It's just that we don't want to ever go outside of a certain range of like where it becomes a distraction technically. It's like, oh, that person's so out of tune that you start thinking about the intonation. It should be in tune enough that, or as in tune as possible, that basically you're not having to think about the intonation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's always fun.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that because it's fascinating to me too. Um, but there were two main singers that I had experiences listening to, which was Carmen McRae. When I was in college, I actually did not enjoy listening to Carmen because of her intonation. And I don't know what year I was listening to, and what process of her development I was listening to, but I really I didn't dig her. And for years I didn't listen to her until I was older. Then and now I think she's the queen of phrasing. And I don't notice any bad intonation. So it's kind of interesting. Um, and um, the other person was Betty Carter. So Betty Carter, first started out kind of singing, not really straight, but she was singing the melody. And then, she moved on to really stretching the boundaries of the moment, being in the moment. And instead of singing, whenever skies look gray to me, she'd be like, when other, and the time would be stretched, and the band was following her sense of time, which was adventurous. So, but in the beginning, I remember seeing her and just thinking, oh my God. So if this is the note, and you're supposed to be singing around there, she was singing there the whole song, and uh, I couldn't believe it. And then and that took me a while to kind of pass that and appreciate what she was actually doing. And then I didn't really hear her singing out of tune anymore either. Maybe it was a period, maybe it was the live gig. She was just, you know,
Well,
the way the sound man set it up or something.
yeah, that actually is very interesting because I've listened to certain recordings or even the same recording on different playback machines. And for instance, when you have the sound is not as warm or resonant,
Yeah.
you start paying more attention to the intonation very often.
Huh.
And so then basically the richer, the more powerful the sound is, the warmer you can
Oh,
kind of
the more
forgive
forgiving
intonation.
it is. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, but also the way
Yeah.
the psychoacoustic of it in a way, if I'm not sure the best way to use that word, but it's it's it gives you a different perspective of intonation. It's
Right.
like on a piano, you can have the same pitch on a violin, but depending on the voicing of the piano, you might actually feel it's sharper or flatter, just based on how the person voices that piano. And so I always thought that was
That's
kind of crazy.
interesting.
Yeah, that's something no one really seems to delve really, really deep into. But
Yeah.
like, if the third is louder, is it going to make it sound flatter or sharper on the fifth, on a piano versus the root of the chord or the
You
seventh
know,
of the chord,
I'm glad you're saying that because really I think I think intonation is this huge, very broad subject, and it's not that there's a right or a wrong exactly. I mean, like you said, if somebody's really out of tune, it's not right. But there's so much to it, like you're describing, the different acoustics, the listening back. Um,
Perlman said something very. I thought his answer was one of the best. Also, I asked him about intonation once, and he said, "Oh, does it sound in tune or out of tune?" That's also a very nice way of putting it because you can have different kinds of intonation, slightly flatter, slightly sharper, or this or that, but does it sound in tune? And if it sounds in tune, it doesn't matter. It's going to be to some degree effective.
That's like
And
that answer of does it sound good or does it feel good, sound good?
yeah, and I think, and they worked together at some point too. And I think there's definitely a very nice understanding of when you know all the details, you can understand everyone's perspective. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, can you enjoy all of those? And
Yeah.
hopefully you
Yeah.
can. And then
I've
you
been
might say,
listening.
yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
well, you might say what's in tune to yourself personally as an artist.
Hmm.
But then you can also say, well, that sounds in tune, even though I know that note's slightly flatter and this note's slightly sharper. But
Yeah.
but it sounds in tune because it's person's consistent with themselves the way they hear.
Yeah. Um, I forget what I was going to say. Um, I forget. Couldn't have been that. My first husband used to say, if you forget, it must have been a lie.
That's not a bad quote either.
Uh, um,
Well, I have a question for you. I mean,
yeah.
when you are listening to different jazz singers and,
Yeah.
and they're scatting,
Yeah.
are you hearing intonation or what are you listening for?
I'm not listening specifically for intonation. If they're really out of tune, I notice.
Hmm.
But I'm listening more to their flow of ideas. Um, I like to think of singing or making music, I guess, but singing. Well, also when I listen to instrumentalists too, I like to think of it as a horizontal flow rather than here's a great idea. I call this vertical. Here's a great idea. There's a great idea. There's a great idea. It's like, sorry, it's not getting me. I want them to be connected somehow. And God, one time I was in Japan and I heard Keith Jarrett. This was supposed to be his last concert, but I don't think it was, with his trio. And he blew my mind. So motifs or motives, are obviously part of classical and jazz and many genres, right?
Hmm.
Probably all genres. But for jazz, you specifically work on a motif and repeating it maybe three times, maybe more, but usually around three times, resolving it, and then going into another connected idea, and then somewhere there's another motif. So, keeps going like that. But what he was doing with his soloing, he would have a motif that would repeat three times. And he would take the end of that and make a new motif for three times. And then he would take the end of that and so on. He did that his whole solo. And it wasn't mechanical, it was totally artistic, which I thought, oh my God, he's been doing that all his life. You have to practice that all your life, to be able to do that. That was an amazing thing. Um, so when I listen, I I want to hear connected ideas that are. I'd like to hear surprising ideas and surprising to me, and um, I'd also like to hear not their personality, but I'd like to hear who they are in what's coming out. And I believe you can hear that, and it's exciting when it's really honest, and it's just flowing out because you're in the moment and you're kind of foreseeing what's next, but you're still in the moment. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. I mean, seeing something, and this is what I meant by feeling like it's real. It's when it basically is flowing out at that moment,
Yeah,
and you're experiencing somebody discovering it along with you.
yeah,
And in classical music, you have a script, but you have to make the script feel like it's being experienced for the first time as well.
yeah. Are there? I mean, there's new music, or I've heard very dramatic, um, contemporary sounding classical music, which I think is written. Are there improvisation moments in classical music?
On occasion, but the vast majority, it's like, oh, do this for like 13 seconds or 18 seconds, improvise or around these pitches or this or that. Um, but in some contemporary music, there is a little bit more of that aspect.
Yeah, yeah,
Actually, it's interesting for me. It's like I'll have, my friend was just making these arrangements for the Speakeasy 4. We did this project in Hawaii,
yeah.
and some of those things were very written out. But
Oh,
then, of
really?
course, all of a sudden you just have like solo, and then you have like, okay, that's a few lines of solo, and then it repeats how many times? Well, we don't know exactly. We're gonna find out together. And then the main thing was just like the order of which instrument was gonna take which first. That
Right,
was the
right.
main thing on that chart. It was just
Yeah,
like, maybe some harmony, all the chord charts, but then it was like trumpet first, then violin, then piano, then bass, or vice
yeah,
versa.
yeah.
And that kind of communication of it, I think, is kind of fun because you're kind of almost discovering in real time what you're going to be doing because you base it off of what somebody else is doing. And what I found really fascinating too was because we did 3 concerts, and I'm curious because you've done this a lot more with in that style. Does how much of the time this an idea from a previous concert make it into the next concert? Does if somebody did a really great motif and all of a sudden they're like, I'm going to develop on that in this concert, and they change a little bit and add a little bit to it, and then the next concert, all of a sudden, the only person that really gets to enjoy that are the other musicians next to them because they got to hear that idea.
Yeah. I think that comes more into composing rather
Yeah,
than improvisation. I think once the idea happens, it's gone for the most part,
yeah,
unless you just fall in love with that motif and, it's ingrained and it keeps coming out. You know what I mean?
yeah. No, it's very interesting for me because the pianist did 1 or 2 things I had done in the previous improv, and then he
Oh,
added it to a
really?
solo in the next concert. Yeah, a little bit.
So he took that into the next concert,
He didn't do it
not
in the
just in the
previous concert,
moment.
but he took an idea I did and then developed on it in the next concert in his improv.
How interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't even know how much is
Did you
conscious or
speak with
not.
him about that? Oh,
No, no,
yeah,
I never
you
did.
didn't happen to speak with him about it.
No, that's
That's
the joy of it for
interesting.
me.
Yeah.
It's the fact that we don't know for sure
Yeah, yeah.
whether it was intentional or just happened because he just had it in his mind.
I mean, I've never heard of that in jazz particularly, but I mean, it happens in the moment.
Yeah.
Like if you say buggity buggity ba, and I can pick that up, buggity buggity, and then change it into whatever the next flow is.
Hmm.
I've heard that, but I've never heard of somebody taking my idea or whatever.
Well, in this particular case, it was tarariera, 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 tarariera,
Yeah.
and they just did tarariera, and they just took that one thing and then developed on it slightly in a different way, going tarariera, tarariera.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so I'm always, wondering where is the line between improvisation and composition.
Well, I mean, I forget who it was, but somebody like Miles or somebody said composition is improvisation slowed down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but then you can speed up the composition after you've slowed it down.
exactly. I have actually been contemplating. I went to see, well, this week, my friend produces a festival called the Angel City Jazz Festival every
Hmm.
year. So he's done it for 18 years. And he calls it creative music. Sometimes I feel like I could call it avant-garde, but I mean, I don't know if that word is so in vogue anymore, avant-garde. I don't know. But anyway, it's definitely creative, you know, and some of it is like too out for me actually. And I have kind of out tastes, but yeah, whatever, whatever. But there have been several people that I've heard, like the last concert that I went to was at the Pasadena Conservatory, which is a really nice little school. And they have, so what they had was um, a man, and I'm going to bring his name up because I want to I want to say this online. His name, I don't know him well enough. Adam Rudolph.
Hmm.
So Adam Rudolph is a percussionist, apparently world renowned. Um, he said some wonderful things in the beginning of the concert. He had a pianist and a flutist, a Japanese flutist who also played percussion, I guess. Kind of, they were all using loops and electronics and acoustic instruments. And so Adam was it was all improvised. It was quite a, the whole set, which was, I don't know, an hour and a half or something. It was just uh I don't know, I can't remember if it was one song, but anyway, the songs were super long. And then he brought in three of the staff there. There was, I think it was two, I'm pretty sure she was playing violin. So two violinists and a cellist who were all wonderful. They just played. And they were improvising. However, in this style of music, I've seen this many times. They'll have a chart that will have sections, right? So you're actually kind of following a chart, but you're improvising within that section. I remember one guy, Billy Mintz, who used to do that. He used to have invite as many bass players who wanted to show up. So sometimes he'd have 20 bass players, and then he'd give them all like a list. One, two, three, four, five. Like one might be play as fast as you can in B minor. And he would call out one, and then everybody would, so there are these, there are, charts that you're kind of following, but you're also improvising, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what's the name for that when you have it like that, or is there a name?
Well, I mean, I would call it um, improvised music, and maybe add some words like lead improvised music, something like
Hmm.
that. Or maybe it's like Rocco says, maybe it's just called creative music. I don't know. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a genre and there seems to be an audience for that as well. Um, so, but it's a very personal thing, right? Listening to these people group improvising and reacting to each other and yeah, wow, you know.
Seeing their thoughts in real time.
Yeah, and you again, like also you have to be in the mood as an audience member. You have to be in the mood for that kind of music. You might prefer that music one day and not be able to listen to it another day, right?
Well, it also depends on who is the person doing it, you know what I mean? Because, like, depending on who's coming up with an idea, what does in B minor on bass mean?
Yeah.
And somebody and do it really fast. For one person, it could be da 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 one note. For another person, it could be them running up and down the bass like a crazy.
Yes.
And for
Yes.
another person, it could be just doing guitar chords going back and forth.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Actually, one thing I was thinking of when I was listening to that group was um, one thing that I appreciated was as the as a single musician who is putting out the improvisation, because for three people to play together, there has to be a combination of things happening. First of all, the person has to, I mean, aside from the fact that they can play their instrument, right? But they have to, um, in my feeling, they have to reach this perspective of it's not just freedom. It's kind of a recognition of, um, I don't know. For me, this sounds maybe a little strange, but it's almost like, um, okay, sorry, this is really weird. So I've been listening to some, what is it called? I don't know. So I've been listening to this person speak about after death. and what happens. And this concept of what they talk about, where you go and how your awareness is, that to me relates to this perspective that I'm talking about as the so as just one of the three people. You have to be able to reach that spot to hang out in and create. You have to be willing to just throw it out there and move, and everybody is doing that, and so you're in this playing field that where you can play and you can also observe another person doing that too and have that um, come into what you're doing and you go into what they're doing, and then because when I'm watching it and listening to it, that's you can't help but think, wow, that person is really being themselves, and that's part of the joy. And especially for this man, Adam. So he was kind of directing, and but he was just directing them to move forward or to have a certain rhythm, like blah, whatever. But they were actually being themselves, and then he was able to see it from above and observe it and actually create a piece of music that involved five people. To me, that's like fascinating. It's kind of mind blowing, that part of being a musician. It's not just, jazz people improvising or classical people. It's everybody, And really, I mean, I guess you could stretch it out to many different activities that people could do. Golf, I mean, that's kind of one of those too. But it's it's um it's a higher way of looking at it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of golf in particular, it goes up very high. But no, in music, I mean, it's always interesting because you look at different things at different levels.
Yeah,
You look from above and just see the entire piece at once. You can also just see each individual musician and try to imagine a sound all together. Then you can be one of the musicians, or you can be living the experience in real time.
yeah,
Something that's interesting for me though is like how something is organized and yet somebody stays super present. There's this violinist Avery Gitless who I met when he was, I don't know, 94 or 95, and he kept going until the very end, close to 100 almost. And I asked him once, "How do you be yourself?" Because he seemed like he was very much himself, more than almost anyone I've ever met.
yeah.
And he says, "Oh, you don't try to be." I'm like, what do you mean? Well, if you try to be yourself, you're not yourself. Just be yourself.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? It's very very fun, like I mean that I think also we have to laugh sometimes a little bit in order to actually be ourselves and enjoy those
Yeah.
moments, just have a little bit of fun and you're actually not thinking and not over activating the brain. Just let it be.
One book I got from Nachmanovich was I Am.
Hmm.
Did you ever hear him talk about that book?
I heard him
But
talk about it briefly once, but yeah.
I've been reading it, and that's exactly what it is. And it's real, it's a little challenging to read because of how do you talk about this stuff? It's and simply but significantly. So, I really have to be, very, very present to read the words and, imagine what everybody's talking about. It's very interesting. But yeah, the I am thing, I am. I
Well,
mean,
and sometimes more is less and less is more.
Taylor Hatch is here,
Hmm.
and I'm just gonna, I have to refresh my page because I don't see the comments on Facebook and I want to see them. And I have to make sure that, whoops, Now refresh my page. My page. I don't know what Facebook is doing lately, but it doesn't surprise me because they're always doing
Oh,
something.
we have
I'll
5 comments, I
refresh my
think.
page
Let's see.
because yeah, it doesn't surprise me because they're always doing
Where
something.
Oh, we
is
have
I'll
5 comments, I
refresh my
think.
page
Let's see.
because yeah, it doesn't surprise me because they're all. Here we go. Okay. Ah, aha! I see
Oh,
the
a bunch.
comments finally. So you see Taylor's, and
Yeah.
so here he said, well, one question was, I'm sure you take note of this for yourself on occasion, but would you say you've been redefining your pedagogical approach to how you approach the violin or just teaching in general?
Well, I would say it's been interesting because I feel like in a sense I've been looking at toolkits. So like
Toolkits, yeah.
yeah, like everyone has their own way of trying to get to the same result. And very often the results people are trying to achieve are very simple and very similar.
Yeah,
Is somebody
that's
playing in
true.
rhythm with a good sound with good intonation on violin in particular. Um, but then are they doing what the composer intended? Are they following the dynamic markings, what the composer had? And so you basically, at a certain point in life, I think, figure out what works for your personality, your persona, your toolkit, so to speak, of what communication style works for getting across your intention and to get it to the other person in a way that they can understand. And
Yeah,
for different people, you have to try different things, as any teacher has experienced.
right.
So on one hand, yes, I've been aware of that and kind of just been adding to that. But the thing I'm always trying to think about in general is then to what extent is it that our demonstrations need to be something that we kind of showcase that lesson versus to what extent is it something we communicate in words verbally. And the thing is, we don't want people imitating in a sense because we don't want people just copying each other constantly. But then on the other hand, if we don't have that as part of this equation, maybe we're going to lose something. Because there is an oral tradition that you really just have to experience in person or on, if you're recording or the person can explain it plus they're playing. But I think the personal one-on-one feedback when you're getting something in real time, you absorb it in a different way than if you're just watching it. And then it's more easily that it could become part of your actual playing in a way that's ingrained versus something you're just doing because
Hmm.
somebody said try this out.
Yeah,
So now what does that mean? Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a gradual process, so it's hard for me to define like at this point I started saying this or that,
yeah,
and what I think education is. So, in one hand, I do think just absorbing as much information as possible has been one of my goals,
yeah,
and then kind of trying to understand what has been working and doesn't work, and then trying to really think about what is it that I want to see in this world.
yeah,
And I'm still defining a little bit of that because, the things that already are trends and that people are already doing, I don't feel I need to be doing as much of. The things that are going to be lost, and the legacy and traditions that I think are worth preserving or at least people being aware of, I'm starting to feel more and more that I need to be one of the people to kind of make those heard and understood and passed on. Because if we lose them, they're just gone. We're going to have to rediscover things, but it won't be the same. And I think
hmm,
it'd be fun to keep that around, at least so people understand what it is
yeah,
and the intention. Because a lot of times people will imitate a sound and they'll listen to a recording and just do it very much the same. But they
yeah,
don't realize, oh, this initially started because somebody heard a siren in Paris,
yeah,
and then thought, oh, it'd be fun if I slide down very slowly. Or they heard a singer back in the 1920s and they were going, duh. And they were like, oh, I should do that on the violin. And then those shifts started appearing. And then the entire
yeah,
value system of keeping the same tone, quality, and color. So you're just keeping
yeah.
on the same string, I mean, there's endless things like that. Um, okay, now there was another question Taylor had.
Taylor, Taylor is a very good question maker. So he
Yeah.
said, after that, he said, what would you say was the harshest lesson you had to endure that gave you some kind of motivation to progress with your artistic direction? By the way, Lisa Rich says hi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hello. Betty Carter impression. Um,
thanks.
so I would say, the things that kind of harshest lessons are, if a performance didn't go exactly as you intended. Sometimes it can go
Yeah,
better than you actually intended. without you realizing it, but you didn't do
Yeah.
exactly what you had in your mind. Um, so I mean, I I would say actually it wasn't on violin so much. It was one time I was conducting, and I was kind of thrust
Ah,
into conducting a score that I didn't know very well, and that wasn't a good feeling. And I basically decided, one should always know as much as they can before they go in. And you don't always have time if you're doing like six concert programs in a week and you're in five
yeah.
cities doing different programs and you have one rehearsal.
Yeah.
You do the best you can. So being a
Yeah.
realist
Yeah.
about what those situations are and trying to organize your schedule so you don't end up in that situation very often. But yeah, just be as prepared as you can be. I think that's the lesson, because even if you pull it off, it's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
Um, okay, yeah, and I have him talk about, I'll just read
Are
this,
you
Taylor.
saying,
Or
are you
you go
going
ahead.
to one of my best friends?
Yeah, you
Okay,
go.
one of my best friends and former roommates is a violinist from the Netherlands, and I've had talks with him about violin pedagogy that was fascinating to me in all ends of applying to guitar and composition. Stringed instruments are fascinating in that regard.
Yeah, I'll just add to that that we talk about fingerings, but not as much as guitarists. That's a huge thing for guitar. Okay, let's keep going. And of course, I remember you, Taylor. Okay, would
I
you
mean, would
say?
you have anything to say about that violin? Well, that's a big subject, but okay. And he said, would you say, and maybe this is a classical mindset, but have you found ways to connect rigor with practice to a positive mindset? In other words, how have you worked on having a healthier mindset with practice and performance?
I'm generally an optimist because if something sounds bad, that means I can improve it more, and then that's a good thing. So I mean, I think the one thing is you don't want to ever beat yourself up because something doesn't sound the way you want it to.
Yeah,
I think what I try to do very much is not say this is good or bad, not when I'm practicing at least. Um, when I'm practicing, I'm just saying, is it what I want it to be? And if it isn't, how do I get there? And don't think about the rest of it. Is it good or bad? Does that sound
yeah,
amazing? Does that sound terrible? Because that's putting a limit on what it is. You're just putting evaluation as a critic. This was a very good performance. The second you do, this was a very good performance, you're not actually listening to what actually the performance is.
right.
It's a way to hear a performance and then put a category on it. That was a great performance. Now moving on. But
Yeah,
when you're
yeah,
in the process, I like to say, okay, why wasn't it like what I wanted to hear?
yeah,
And was it flat? Was it sharp? Was it the sound? Was I moving? I mean, then you go into the small, tiny, infinitesimal things where they are happening while you're playing in a split second or
yeah,
even less.
yeah,
And so a lot of times I also feel like you want to practice to a point where your technique is just really good.
yeah,
And then you don't want to overplay the piece. So sometimes playing
yeah,
some scales or something else. And then when your technique is in good shape for multiple pieces, it actually kind of circles back to the original piece and also knowing when to let go. Like if you've been playing a piece and you're just practicing it for 2 straight days for 8 hours a day or something, you don't want to kind of just keep pushing it and then you're not seeing any improvement and you're getting stuck and it starts getting worse.
yeah,
So I think sometimes knowing what's the right pacing in a process, like, okay, I'll play this piece for 5 days now. I'll let it go for 2 days. I'll come back to it. Or I'll play it now in 3 months. I'll play it again, and then sometimes magic happens when you're sleeping. So a lot of times just work a little bit and go to sleep and wake up the next morning and it sounds better. And a lot of things that were hard are now easy.
yeah,
So I think just trusting ourselves and the amazing brains we all
yeah.
have.
Albert Einstein. I want to share the other video. Okay. There it is here.
Oh yeah, this was a just to give a little bit of context.
Yeah.
I finished this, I think, the day before the concert, and this was the second movement of a violin concerto that I had. This was the Armenian Chamber Orchestra at Pouplange Festival de Musique, Pouplange Classique Festival, and my friend Francois Poisson, Xavier Poisson, he's the founder of that festival, and yeah, this was a fun
You
experience.
said you finished it. You finished what? You did you
Finished
write?
writing it. Yeah, I
Oh,
composed this
you
piece.
actually wrote this piece.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this is the second movement of it.
All right. Here we go. Oops. Yes. God, that is
Can anybody
beautiful.
guess what?
Wow, that is gorgeous. Oh,
Thanks very much.
yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Woo. Um, I have two kind of technical questions, I guess, but you know, of course, I'm asking your opinion about all this stuff. Vibrato.
Yeah.
How much is too much? or,
Well,
or how much do you really? How
the
much do you
standard
really?
answer, and then we should delve deeper. So the standard answer is vibrato is too much once you actually hear it. And so when you're starting to pay attention to it, it probably is a little bit too much. When you're just hearing it as part of the music, then it's good. So it's like some opera singers and people talk about like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like you're hearing a third.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So like I don't know where it is in practice, but maybe a minor third or a major third, like when it
yeah,
gets over a certain interval,
yeah,
and it's over a certain time duration between the pitches going up and down. I do think, or under, I guess, depends on your perspective, but I think there's a certain type of thing where you can hear vibrato that sounds a little too wide, and it starts kind of distracting you. Or if it's really, really fast, you can be like, it can create anxiety and change the sound and the feel of the music. So I think, I think a lot of all these aspects, the way they combine, um, it's a combination of the sound, the color of the sound, and the vibrato. So like for one person, they could have the same exact vibrato, and it will come across in a completely different way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I know for some of the jazz saxophone players I've talked to, they they actually feel like vibrato is part of their sound, their unique sound, you
Hmm.
know. So, I mean, yeah, and of course it is, but I got the impression from them that they were working on it, you know. Like I don't work on my vibrato, and if I notice it too much, I think it's too much, and
Yeah, I think about it a fair amount though,
yeah,
because it can change the entire feeling if you just slow it down or speed it up slightly. And so the idea for me is that the vibrato is never exactly the same. And for singers, a lot of times when you add more energy, it does that automatically a little bit naturally.
yeah. Sorry. My
Yeah, so
cough.
that's something I mean I spend a lot of time thinking about is the vibrato because I feel like that's the connection between the notes is done with the vibrato. And very often, I mean, the bow everyone is aware of to some degree, but a lot of times people don't even realize they're not vibrating the beginning or end of notes. And then when you have that connection between two notes, you're losing the bel canto-esque kind of connection. And
Yeah.
you're now hearing these points, which it's kind of like there's this very interesting interview with Benjamin Zander where he talks about how when we get older, we stop having as many impulses in music. So somebody dum 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 da get a da, and then they get a little older dum da ya da dum da ya. Then they get a little bit older da ya da yum da da dum da ya da dum da ya da. So I mean, it's kind of the idea of when your vibrato is stopping throughout notes, you're creating more of those impulses in a way. You're also losing certain longer phrasing, which doesn't mean you can't use non-vibrato also, but I think all
Yeah.
those elements together mean there you have more possibilities when you have a vibrato that can be varied on violin.
And so, do you actually sometimes, very subtly, notice and direct a vibrato at the end of a note or a phrase into the next note?
I generally, as a standard, like to connect the notes. I like legato.
Yeah.
So that's my general standard. The thing I'm paying more attention to is kind of the intensity of the vibrato or the width or speed sometimes, or just what is the color or the emotion, of the music, and then how am I adding or getting more of that, getting closer to that rather than the opposite.
Yeah.
And the issue is sometimes physically what we feel as a sensation isn't always what you hear in the sound. So trying to make sure your perception of sound from a distance is the same as what you're hearing up close. And then when you can translate the sound that you're hearing under the ear and imagining what it sounds like from a distance or over a sound system or different, different ways, it gives you a perspective to kind of be more free and relax a little bit because you're not unsure of how it's coming out in the same way.
Yeah. You, is it a problem when you, because you travel a lot and you play in such different circumstances, is it something that you give a lot of effort to, like with the sound man? Do you find that sound people are doing bad things, good things? Do they have to be directed? Do you want more of an acoustic sound? Do you have a microphone on your violin?
I've
What do
done
you?
everything. All those, I've had all those experiences. No, the funniest ones are like when when I talk to somebody for about 2 minutes, usually I can get a very quick vibe, like, oh, this is going to be an issue, or oh, this I can trust this person, and I don't get, when you can trust somebody, it feels really great
Yeah,
because you always, if somebody's an in-house sound person and they're always doing one space,
yeah,
you generally want to trust them.
yeah,
The issue is that a lot of people never work with acoustic instruments, or they're used to like more pop or certain specific kind of sounds.
yes.
And so when they get a acoustic instrument, they don't really understand how to, mic it in a certain way so that it
Yeah.
makes sense in that context.
Uh,
So, there's certain mics I bring with me around the world. And for live sound and for different things, I often will say, please use this. And most of the time that ends up guaranteeing at least a certain result. If I don't have that, sometimes, they use these, I don't want to I don't want to say anything bad about any brand, but they're about $80 microphones that are in almost every, house. They have at
yeah,
least like 8 or 10 of them. Most of them are banged up because somebody did a mic drop at some point or they just fell off a stand.
yeah, yeah,
But they're very reliable. They sound pretty good. They're, good standard mics. But you basically have a sound that's a little more compressed, a little brighter, and doesn't have as much detail on those microphones. And I see those in almost everywhere I go. So then I bring my mics, and all of a sudden you hear the detail. You can hear more dynamic range. You can hear more of the clarity, and that's what I'm looking for a little bit more in live sound.
yeah,
Acoustically, which is the majority of what I do, it's because the balance with the orchestra or with the piano, it's like positioning on stage. Where am I standing? At which angle am I turning? Is the piano half stick or full stick? Full stick ideally, but there's certain circumstances where it's just the hall for some reason where the piano is placed, it just doesn't work so well there that way. And yeah, I mean, sometimes you want to move very close to the front of the stage. Sometimes you want to play softer, and sometimes you want to play exactly the way you would normally play, even though it sounds really strange under where, like in the part of the hall you're standing in.
mm,
So what you hear on stage might not translate into the hall.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's always an interesting acoustical experience.
How long are your sound checks? It sounds like probably long.
Well, it really depends. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you have 2 days of sound check or one day of sound
Oh,
check, but it depends on like if you're having a television rehearsal, like if you're having television cameras there and they're trying to figure out how many, angles they need to reset and things, and that can take a couple hours.
yeah,
So like I'll have a sound check typically, let's say the, day of the concert,
yeah,
and we'll start at like 1, and then those guys could be working until 5 or 6 o'clock, and then the concert happens at, 7 or something.
yeah,
So for the larger productions, that sometimes takes the cake, but like very often sound checks are like 2 to 3 hours at most.
yeah. Lisa is asking, which is your best or favorite mic?
Oh, favorite mic. Oh, that's the thing is I love all the microphones. I love ribbon microphones in particular,
Yeah.
but it's when you combine them with condensers that they can do some really special stuff. U67 Neumann on my voice. I have it in Hawaii right now, and my friend cellist there, he uses it occasionally, and so that microphone, I that's one of my favorite for speaking actually.
Mm,
Um, but for violin, I think generally you have a lot of the high frequencies in the high pitch. In live sound, you lose some of that from those speakers from a distance. The further you go, the more detail you lose. So sometimes I prefer condensers for live sound. But for like just an actual recording, if you're listening back on professional speakers, I like ribbon microphones a lot. So like uh, in the Blue Note, I performed in Hawaii, and in that space, I used a ribbon microphone that picks up sound from both sides. And most people in live sound would say you shouldn't do that because you'll get feedback. But if it's done with the right balance or dynamic and it's close up and it's not in front of the speakers and I don't need much monitoring, then sometimes I've been able to get away with that as well.
Yeah.
So like a Royer SF2, um, that's a microphone I really love. Our, the 121s are more famous in Royer, but that was the one that John Jennings, turned me on to after Adam Apeshouse, demoed it for me and introduced us. John Jennings is the president of Royer Labs, which makes those microphones in California. So I've been to their actual offices and I've tried out a lot of things. I think they're a really great company. I just saw AEA at the NAMM event along with my friend John, and I just wanted to say that they were very funny. Wes Dooley started that company out, and then the person that currently, is running it, she is still working with him, but she showed me the business card and it said Cat Wrangler in Chief. And I was like, these microphone people, I love them. And so, yeah, AAA microphones focus on like the RCA vintage microphones and taking them and making new ones. So they have all their original designs.
Yeah.
That's another ribbon microphone company I really love. I have several of their mics, but this one I'm currently using right now is just an RCA microphone, 44BX, which is one of the most famous microphones of all time that Sinatra used in many occasions. U67 also, U47, which go for $30,000 now, mic. Those were some of the Beatles recorded on some of those microphones and many others. But all of them have a slight difference in sound.
Yeah.
Capitol Records, blanking on his name right now, but the engineer there who recently passed away, he was talking about how he tried to mix everything from the microphones and placement. So just changing the microphones and putting up different placement. He didn't have to do tons of stuff in post-production. He'd add a tiny bit of the Fairchild compression, maybe 2 decibels, and then he'd mix it with just the faders, add a reverb, maybe several different reverbs, and then send it out to the mixing engineer, or not mixing engineer, he was mixing it.
Mastering.
He would send it to the, yeah, Al Schmidt, that was his name. He would send it to the mastering engineer, and very often the mastering engineer would say, "Great!" And they'd get a mastering engineering credit,
Oh my God.
but they wouldn't actually have done anything. So he was always like, this is one of the most bizarre jobs. I send my recording over and they say, "Great." And I'm like, "Did you do anything?" "No." And now, but they get credit for mastering. Even though like Al Schmidt really did the mastering, I guess then in a way it
Right,
feels
right,
like.
right. That's funny.
Yeah. So favorite microphones. Yeah, that's definitely some of the ones. Royer, RCA, some of the AA, but then also DPAs I love because they have such realistic clarity sound. Neumanns, I have a U87 modified by Klaus Hein, which it's really hard to get those mods. You have to call him like for months and months just to get on his list.
Huh.
But I was able to get them from a friend, a pair,
Yeah.
and they're modded for cello, so specifically for getting the best quality sound out of a cello.
Hmm.
Um,
Lisa said Rivan, Rivan, I don't know.
yeah, I haven't really tried those mics so much.
Yeah.
But maybe it's something else, but yeah, DPA, Neumann, Royer, AAA, RCA, are kind of like the basis for my collection.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed the violin, I guess, was it on your, I think it was the first video we watched, the one with you in Alaska. Was that the violin with the writing or the scratching on the back, the design?
Yeah, I had gold leaf on the back. That was actually made by Tim Durink in Belgium,
Hmm.
and he based it on indigenous plants and animals from Hawaii. And my friend Joshua Nakazawa helped commission that entire project with all those instruments. And then when I first heard about, the Glacier Cave and bringing, music there, I
Yeah.
was thinking, I'm not putting out a wooden violin there. That's not a good
Oh,
idea.
I
And
see. Right.
so
That's not a
actually,
wooden violin. Okay.
exactly. So it's made out of flax fiber. You can actually look through it. It's translucent. You can see the sun if you hold it up and look through it.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah. And it's very durable. And you could have somebody fall on it, or and you probably might have separation of the fingerboard, but like the actual flax fiber is going to be pretty durable. It's not quite as durable as like carbon fiber, but it's quite close. Yeah. And
And
those,
the sound and the feeling of it.
it's closer to acoustic violin. It's a little different. The cello actually is maybe better than some acoustic ones, and the violins arguably in some cases are better than some, but I do think the cellos in particular are really nice. The violins I enjoy more than carbon fiber personally. So yeah, it's just a really great, chance
So
to use those.
carbon fiber as opposed to flax fiber. That's what you're flax? Did you say
Flax fiber.
flax?
Yeah,
Flax
like the
fiber.
plant, the linen. Yeah.
Yeah. And then carbon is made from
Carbon, yeah, carbon fiber. They're usually more black looking instruments with the
oh,
pattern on them, and they're very durable. Like you could use those to like, I wouldn't say use them to hammer something, but like they're pretty strong.
oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, like
What
if
do you
you have
what
a airline accident, they're more likely
yeah.
to survive than a
Oh,
wooden instrument by
yeah.
far.
I think didn't I read that you had a particular amazing violin in your
Well, I
possession?
often play a violin from 1757 by
Yeah.
Guadagnini.
Yeah.
And that's been on loan from Sowing Lamb Foundation. I mean, it's Sowing Family of Sowing Lamb and Classically Connected Incorporated. So that's a really wonderful violin. It has a lot more tone colors in a lot of beautiful ways. I also recently got a violin in 2023 from Louis Samarim, and that was made for me. I'm having a second one made now,
Hmm.
and I think they're one of the best living makers. So I've been, kind of exploring that sound as well. And so depending on if the climate's not ideal, and even sometimes just indoors, sometimes also, I just find that violin does super well, and people sometimes even prefer it in some cases. So okay, let's
How do
keep.
you direct somebody who's making you a violin? What kind of things do you tell them?
Depends on the maker, but you tell them what model you want. In some cases, Guarneri or Strad model, which model within that family of makers. So like Caritas 1743 Dojezu, I like that as a model for the violin for this one, the first one I did.
What is unique about that model?
Well, it's just I tried a lot of different instruments that were modeled after it by the maker, and I liked those in particular. And then Perlman's violin, I'm having a copy made of this wall, which is his violin he's been playing on. And I got a chance to play that one. That sounds really quite miraculous. And in some books, it's listed as maybe the greatest sounding violin in the world. So I was
Wow.
like, well, hey, why don't we start with something really great sounding and see how close you can get? So, so that's why I chose that violin. Also, I think it looks very nice too, and they're doing very good antiquing.
Yeah.
Um,
Are they
so
the
let's
same size?
hmm What?
Are they the same
Well,
basic
very close, very
size?
close, very
So
close.
the difference in violins are obviously, I guess, the material, and also is it just the way the guy like
Well,
uh,
it's
you know
everything. It's everything. So, like for instance, what kind of wood are you using? What kind of uh, density does that wood have? How thin is each part of that wood?
right?
Then, what kind of varnish are you using? How thick is the varnish? What kind of spirit are you using, as part of the varnish, or, what kind of chemicals are in it? Um, then, how thick is the bridge? What's the angle of the fingerboard? What material is it? Used to be ebony all the time. Now they're using alternative materials because ebony's hard to get out of Madagascar, so they don't do that anymore. Then you have, the pegs and the type of strings you're using, and just so much more than even what I'm
Okay.
kind of the
Yeah.
speed of sound of the wood. I mean, there's just so many small
Wow.
details, and
Okay.
you cut the wood differently depending on what kind of wood it is, so that you're choosing the right piece of wood for the right kind of model.
Yeah.
Because some violins, they're very high density wood and they're very thin, and vice versa. You might have a situation where some particular kind of wood is a little softer and you want it a little thicker so it has more support. And then there are exceptions to everything, and just it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I just want to get to some of these questions.
Sure.
So best favorite mic we answered. What are your favorite kind of rooms and venues you enjoy playing in, and what sounds do you like to capture? Be that if the space is big or small. Um, I would say like if the hall just sounds amazing, you can just put up a pair of mics and you already got most of the result. Then you just close mic for a little detail here and there, but that's yeah. I mean, those are my favorite to record in. It's like if you have a real beautiful concert hall,
Yeah.
you don't have to worry so much. You're gonna get a good recording most likely if you play well, or whoever is playing well.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Oh, what did Taylor say? What are your pet peeves for violin, or what do you see other violinists do? I guess that you don't agree with.
If they're not maintaining the setup properly. So if, for instance, the bridge is about to fall down, like you want it kind of straight or slightly angled back usually. But if it starts going too far, it gets warped, and then it can like gradually end up really muting the sound. And so often, like when I see people, I just move the bridge slightly. I've done probably over 200, 300 adjustments on that. I don't know exact number. And in most of those cases, it just sounds way better just because somebody just didn't pay attention for, half a year or 2 months even.
Yeah.
And the bridge just started moving. And all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I don't feel good. I'm not happy. I'm sounding bad these days. And I just look at the bridge and I'm like, well, yeah, because the bridge is, oh, I sound so much better. I feel so much better. And so it's a real thing for violinists where if the bridge is and the setup is new strings, once in a while, new bow rehair, rosin, and
Yeah.
and so I see people that play so well and they don't do proper setup maintenance. And then there's also a subset of people that just don't have a good enough of violin and they're doing everything right, but they just don't have a potential to sound as good as they could.
Yeah.
So I try to address those, by suggesting people, try things out and experiment.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's very important. It's just proper setup because if you don't have that, then basically you're putting a limit on what your potential is.
Yeah. That's kind of aligns with alignment for a vocalist. You can haphazardly have good alignment, but maybe like over the years you start to kind of lean forward, and so you're out of alignment.
Yeah.
So, to be in alignment so that the sound can travel freely. That's kind of a similar idea for vocalists.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes many, many years, but you'll develop a bad habit that doesn't hurt you until 30 years later or something.
Yeah.
And I
That's
hopefully
amazing.
30 years, not 20 years later or 15 years. I mean, so
Yeah.
that's why I always think it's important in technique on violin too. You're not thinking, "Oh, it works now." You're thinking, "Does it feel good? Does it work? Does it make sense right now?" Because it's not about right now. It's about the long term.
So, question about that. Do you uh, do you still work on? I mean, I would assume that you still practice because you have to be ready and fluent
Hmm.
and able. But do you still think about? Let's see. I'm not sure if the question is, do you still think about certain things, or what do you think about when you're practicing? Are there, like for me, alignment is one thing, breathing. Um, there's these images because singing is a very mental thing, because I can't feel I can't feel what's going on inside, so I have to imagine and then be directed by the result many times. But is there something things that you think about? You don't have to tell me all of them, but are there things that you think about in your practice nowadays?
Well, I mean, everything still, the same basic thing, I
Yeah.
think still applies today.
Okay.
Now, I might not be thinking about is my hand doing this, or, like I might not be thinking about some specifics in that regard, but like
Yeah.
the vibrato, how is the sound? Is it in tune? Is the rhythm good? Is the articulation, my sense of timing and pulse, does that feel right? In other words, is the strong downbeat, is it too heavy in comparison to the next beats, or is it just the right amount? In
Mm.
the regarding like the style of music, it's like where you hear somebody doing tango, da 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 da, and you hear somebody else doing da 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 da,
Yeah.
and you, in one case something feels very grounded, in another it makes you feel a little bit off,
Yeah.
for drive, but it feels a little bit off center.
Yeah.
And that's what I find so interesting is you have the exact same rhythm. Somebody could be performing
Mm.
exactly with a metronome in both cases, and you get completely two different feelings. So that's something I'm always trying to work on, is like, how do you rhythmically feel things in a way that it makes sense in the musical context?
That's actually a very deep subject, right? And I mean, I find myself teaching that a lot because I have to tell, especially young students or students who come in and they're classical singers and they want to learn jazz, the feeling of the rhythm in jazz. So it's it's a very creative subject to talk about, right? Do you have certain ideas on how to tell people about that?
Well, I think every person's individual.
Yeah.
For some people, playing with a metronome is helpful. For other people, they have to move their body and
Mm,
just get it into their
yeah.
body and just like tap your
Yeah.
foot and just whatever's necessary until you start feeling it.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know whether it's a good or bad habit to have that foot tap or like move or dance on stage. Like people say
Yeah.
don't do that in classical very often, but in jazz, I don't know to what extent that's a good or bad thing. Of course, if
Mostly
you're,
good, but changes.
yeah, but it depends. Like, let's say somebody puts a mic up and they don't have very good shock mount absorption. And now you're hearing every time somebody's heel claps on the floor, you're hearing this
Yeah.
huge giant
Yeah.
beat.
Yeah.
So I've seen that also.
Yeah.
But I think really moving the body is one of the best ways to kind of develop a sense of rhythm, and then just playing with people that have great sense of rhythm. You
Yeah.
just gradually develop a better sense of rhythm playing with more people that have good rhythms. I
Yeah.
remember I played in Juilliard pre-college and remembering thinking, oh, this chamber music, and it felt really hard in some cases when I was very young. And then as I got older, I'm like, oh, it's so easy. What was I like then? And then I jumped in because my friend was conducting the Juilliard Pre-College Orchestra, and I played with a few people that are younger every once in a while, and I was just like, oh, this is hard again, huh? What's going on? And it was because when you're playing with people that haven't built confidence in their own rhythm yet, they are going to kind of just listen to whoever's the most confident, and then they might second guess themselves even if they go with it sometimes. So you don't have a bass where it's like you have a rhythm section or you have something that feels confident. It's like a percussionist who's your rhythm section, or a pianist, and then they second guess if their rhythm is right. And then it's not that they're out of rhythm, but they don't give you a strong downbeat, or they don't give you like the beats that are important for you to feel like you can be free.
Yeah.
And so then
Yeah.
you start feeling a little bit more like the
Yeah.
tension there. And so like then it's learning, if it's chaotic around you, how do you feel so relaxed that everyone feels more relaxed around you?
Yeah.
And that for me is kind of one of the marks of a great many great artists, is when they're there, everyone else starts sounding better. And that's always the question of what is causing that. And
That's very true. I
yeah,
heard I heard something like that the other day. The musicianship in the band was mediocre. Yeah. And a singer got up who's like really great, and everything just, went up, you know, a level. And but that was really obvious. But and on the other hand, I used to have a jam session for 16 years every week. And such an interesting thing, like any singer who would get up, it didn't matter if they were a beginner or an experienced singer, if they were listening to the band sounded better. If they were not listening to the band, like they were more focused on themselves, the band sounded worse.
yeah.
I thought that was fascinating, actually. Yeah.
Well, I think the number one thing I that's most important is just listening better,
Yeah. Yeah.
and somehow being free and not tense while you're listening, but hearing more at
Yeah.
the same time. And
Yeah.
that's where I think some of the greatest musicians I know, it's when they hear things. They don't always know how to say things with words necessarily, but you can tell that an eyebrow raises slightly, or there's like a slight small facial reaction when you do something and they notice and they know and no one ever talks about it ever. And that's what's so fun for me. It's like you'll share a moment that no one will ever talk about ever. And that moment now is a shared kind of experience that's almost like a sixth sense because you can't really put it in words because it's like a joke that's very funny. And the second you try to explain it, it's not funny. Um,
Right.
I mean, one of my more recent jokes was, why did the chicken cross the road, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that chicken was there way before the roads were. So, I mean, I think the chicken was just walking, and eventually there was a road built in front of the chicken, and the chicken was like, "What's that road doing there?" So that's the original chicken crossing the road joke from my perspective. Should be.
That's funny, Eric. Oh my God. Well, so if people wanted to delve deeper into your music, would they go looking for records or how would they do it?
You can search some stuff on Spotify or YouTube Music or, on YouTube. Also, my Instagram handle is Violin Dragon.
Okay.
So definitely,
I'm gonna
things
type
there.
that in.
Um, and I think, yeah, just Instagram probably is where I'm posting the most. But I'm going to try to do a better job of posting the next year. I'm recently thinking of starting a new podcast or interview series called Musicians and Chess. So I'm going to be trying to do some interviews over chess to kind of throw people off their game or on their game
Wait. So you're playing chess and you're interviewing?
at the same time. That's my goal.
That's
So we'll
hysterical.
we'll see. I need to actually launch this first, but there's already are some
I
plans.
love that idea. I think that's really catchy.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's the thing for me. It's like, how do we get people to not do their standard answers or to see more of who they are, reacting in real time? Kind of like what we were talking about a lot of this conversation of feeling like you're getting to experience somebody discovering something in real time with you.
Yeah.
And how do we create those moments and make it easier for people? And I think it's sometimes when we're doing too many things that we don't have time to think that things just happen. It's like try counting and singing some music, um, or playing some music on violin in particular, and we say one, two, three, four, one, two, three, da, ya da da, three, and then like people start saying all the wrong numbers and all
Oh,
sorts of
yeah,
things
yeah, yeah,
because it's
because
the brain is too,
yeah.
it's like doing too many things at once,
Yeah, yeah,
and then you actually see the person without them trying to be, or simply you just see them being and dealing with the situation.
yeah, yeah.
So, so that's an experiment I'm going to try.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So, do you ever, this is really kind of unrelated question. I'm thinking in the back of my mind about something. Do you ever, um, like have a small room, small venue that's not super designed for, like a classical music venue, and it holds maybe about 40 people. Would you ever create something in a situation like that, or that's just like not your
Wait, when
alley?
you say create, what do you mean by create?
Oh, like decide that you're going to have a small concert, an intimate concert
Oh, I've done
and
many.
invite.
Yeah, I've done many. The group muse, for instance, I was on the group musicians council,
No.
and that's all house concerts.
Oh,
So you get to interact with people after the concert in real time and like really just have a conversation. Sometimes the most recent one actually joined some of our Monday chats, um, Val, and
who is it?
Val,
Oh,
yeah,
I don't.
she's joined a few of our Monday chats.
Okay. Group music.
Group
Is that what?
Muse, G
Group
O group,
muse.
and then Muse. Yeah,
Is that
and
all over the country or is
it's
it
all over the
very?
country. Yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
and
Okay.
their house concerts, and it's kind of unique because you get to actually talk to your audience and get to know people and
Yeah.
have a conversation, and it's
Yeah.
very intimate and casual, and depending on which home it is, it could fit, a lot of people or many fewer.
Yeah.
But just to kind of have that experience, it's a very nice one to have. So, yeah, whenever I have time, I try to, you know, do something and try something out there
Yeah.
and just experiment. Last time we ended up getting some other people playing after we finished the concert and we were jamming, and it
Oh,
was, it
wow.
was a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's cool. There's a beautiful classical group here in LA called Celestina,
Hmm.
and they do different programs. But one time I saw them in a what is the name of that? It's a I'm sorry, brain. A building where that has old people buried, a building, a whatever that,
Mausoleum.
a mausoleum. Thank you. They had a concert in a mausoleum. It was it's really cool. I mean, you never would have
It's
seen something like that, and the music was really good, and we were relatively close. I mean, it was kind of a weird shape, but still we were relatively close in the same room, and of course the sound was pretty fabulous.
no, that those can be really amazing acoustic experiences, and also when you go into a different environment, you're already listening in a different way.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's something I think about often is the concert doesn't start when you go in and sit there. It starts, when you first hear about the idea, then about the artist, the story. You walk in and you've now had to deal with the parking or you've had to deal with the attendant of the parking. So already you're
The whole
starting to have an
process.
experience. Yeah, the entire thing is already started. Like when you go to see some of those stadium performance shows, it's like, oh, you have to go through this, and then that crowd and this gate. And so by the time you get there, you're like, oh my God, I finally arrived. And in some other cases, the parking, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have any space here. You got to go to the next slot. You know, it's going to be a different experience, for somebody who just drives straight up and goes straight into the concert hall. And I think that's something I experimented once with in 2016,
Mm.
where I had a chocolatier and I rented out Blaisdell Auditorium, which is where Hawaii Symphony performs. And we had a chamber concert. We brought some taiko drum and soprano from the Met and myself and some others, playing as well. And what was interesting is before we started for half an hour, we had a chocolate tasting with um, Will Lydgate from Steelgrass Farms in Hawaii. And he brought in from Manoa Chocolate all these different samples from Madagascar chocolate, this other kind of chocolate from this region, and all these different places, and all Hawaiian chocolates. But everyone got the taste, and he said, "Well, like taste this element of it. You can taste the vanilla of this, and this bean is from here." And so everyone then had these chocolates, and I've never had an audience that like engaged and alert at the very beginning of a concert. And I think that's a big part of it is that, there's certain things where we go in, it takes us a while to kind of zone into a concert or to get out of our daily troubles or what we're dealing with. And I think that there are ways to do that in concert settings that could, really get people so that, you don't have to start with a piece that first gets people warmed into things, but like they're already there with you before you've even started.
I love that. That is just a great idea. I'm writing that down. I love that because I'm creating this new show with three of my friends. I felt like I was tired of just performing my jazz thing.
Hmm.
Okay, come see me. I'm playing jazz. And so I wanted an audience experience. So there's music, there's poetry, there's a little bit of dance, there's audience participation, speaking, and maybe playing drums, um, and some art. And I just wanted people to be engaged and feel together and have an experience, that they would go away with something a little bit changed.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I just like that idea, what you just were saying. It goes along with it. Like how are people going to come in and start well, I mean, parking, but I mean, after the parking, they walk in and so what is the beginning of the process?
Oh, even
And
digital offerings, like if somebody gets the ticket for the concert, here's a program digital and a few
mm,
gifts for you,
oh, yeah,
and if you show this, you're going to get your special coffee from this coffee farm
yeah,
that is a partner with our concert series, or like it's small things like that, and just ways to make people kind of feel like, oh wow, I'm part
they're
of this
involved.
community, and it's a
Yeah,
special kind of event, and it's not just a normal concert,
yeah,
even though
yeah,
that can be special in its own way too.
yeah. Thanks, Eric.
No, thank you.
Eric, thank you for speaking. It was really great. I loved it. I loved our conversation. I knew I would.
Likewise.
Thank you so much. By the way, where are you now? I keep forgetting.
Well, I was in LA yesterday, Hawaii 4 days ago, and then San Francisco 7 days ago. So it's been an interesting
And
week.
where are you now?
I just got into Jersey this morning.
Okay, that's the brown thing in the back.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
Jersey thing. Okay. Well, thank you. Really fun. I'll see you on the next Zoom thing, which is in a few weeks, I guess. And
Yeah. See you very soon.
thank you again. Thanks. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Thanks so much.
Bye,
Thank you
Eric.
everybody for watching.